There were two animated films that came out in February, both sequels to animated films that I love. With Lego Movie 2 being great, I was hoping How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World was just as great. And I gotta say, it was pretty flippin' fantastic. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is the completion of the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. Hiccup has now taken the place of his father as the chief of Berk, and him and the rest of the dragon riders are continuing to save dragons. But those responsible for poaching the dragons has now found the aid of a legendary dragon slayer who has killed all of the Night Furies save for Toothless, or at least all the male ones. With Berk being overpopulated with dragons, having to face this new enemy that seems to be one step ahead of them, Hiccup decides to move Berk to another place to try to find the hidden world where all dragons come from, and hopefully live there with the dragons. Oh, and of course, a female Night Fury is in this movie, a Light Fury. Toothless finds her and falls in love. Before I get into what I liked about this movie, let me just tell you right off the bat, I'm pretty biased because I love the other two How to Train Your Dragon movies, and I'm a sucker when it comes to fantasy and dragons. Give me a movie with a dragon rider or a dragon that befriends our main character, and I'm pretty much hooked. So as I praise this movie, just take it with a grain of salt because I'm pretty biased towards dragons. The animation for this film is absolutely stunning. It's breathtaking. It might be even better than the other two films. You still get the same character designs as all three films, but there's a little bit more detail to the environment, and even close-ups of our main characters, I could see individual facial hairs, like just stubble on Hiccup as a beard is slowly growing, or maybe more of peach fuzz. Because yes, you do get him with a beard in this movie. It's in the trailer, but it's at the very end of the movie, just so you know. So don't expect Hiccup with a beard like halfway through the movie and then have a beard for the rest of the film. And as always, the flying sequences, the sky sequences, is truly magical and just breathtaking. Speaking of magical, the hidden world is just as bright and vibrant and magical. And there's a lot of great animation, there's a lot of great colors, there's a lot of just moments where I was in awe of the animation alone. The score has been really great with these films, and it's still great in this movie as well, and it really emphasizes the mood of the movie and just the fantastical, magical imagination of the film. We still have the same actors playing our recurring characters, and they all do a really good job just as usual. And I know a lot of people do complain about Jay Baruchel's voice for Hiccup, but for one, in the first one, it made complete sense because he was an outcast. He was considered sort of a mistake, and it made sense for his voice to be like that and to be a little bit different from the rest of the Vikings. And so I thought he was perfectly cast for that. And you can't really change the cast when you've already had that distinctive voice for that character. And I feel that his voice, and he added some depth to the character and some growth to the character as the movies progressed. I know there's some people that probably will still complain by his voice, but I think it's different from the other two movies. I think there's something different in his performance and some more depth in his performance as the movie goes along, as the character grows himself. I also really enjoy the villain in this movie. I actually like him more than Drago in the second film. I thought the villain posed a really great threat in this movie. He was always one step ahead. He could play mind games with people and know how to manipulate them into doing what he wants. And he's also got this twisted thrill of the hunt. He has dragons in this movie, but they're like dragon hunters, and the way he controls them is even more twisted and more disturbing than Drago controlled the dragons in the second film. And let's not forget that there are some parallels to him and Hiccup in this movie. Because, like Hiccup, this villain, Grimmel, he captured a Night Fury when he was a kid, but instead he killed that Night Fury, became a hero to his village, and then became a dragon slayer, killing all Night Fury. So it does show like this darker path if Hiccup were to kill Toothless at the beginning of the film rather than save it and befriend it, then he could have taken a very dark, twisted path like Grimmel did. Before this movie even had a trailer, I knew that there was going to have to be a moment where Toothless finds another of his kind, because that's one of the big mysteries that was not solved yet, and if it's going to be a trilogy, it was going to happen in the third film. And of course, he finds a female, and there is a romance in this movie between those two, and I actually liked a lot of those moments, especially where there was a lot of visual storytelling during those moments. Oh, also the action sequences. I love the flow of the action sequences. I love how it was filmed. There was a lot of really cool moments, and actually the way it is all framed is pretty spectacular. I actually saw this 2 times in theaters. The second time was pretty recent because MoviePass would allow me to actually see it, and I figured, you know what? Why not use MoviePass for this? I can see it a second time. And I figured I might as well see a good movie between 2 bad movies, because I saw 2 bad movies. I'll talk about them later, but for now I'm going to talk about How to Train Your Dragon 3, because that was actually good at least. And upon second viewing of it, the framing, the cinematography, whatever you want to call it, because it's a computer-generated animated film, but it was pretty spectacular, and it looked like a real film, or it's framed like a big blockbuster film that had some artistic value to it, or in the cinematography. If you've seen those kind of movies, it's filmed like those kind of movies, and that's one of the things I really loved about it, especially on the second viewing. And I will say, even though maybe the first half of the movie was just really good, I mean, I wouldn't say it's just okay. I mean, it was still really good, but it's the third act of the film that is truly phenomenal. And if it wasn't for a few nitpicky things in the third act, I have to say it is near perfection. How this movie ends and how this movie bookends the trilogy. And that alone makes it a really great film. Because this movie introduces how this might end. It's showing like the chaos of Berk as they've rescued a few more dragons to bring to Berk, and they're showing just how overcrowded it is, and then also Toothless falling in love with another dragon who is afraid of humans, which makes sense in what she's been through, or at least what we feel like she's been through. And throughout the movie, it gives you like little hints that this could end in a certain way. And there was one little thing that happened where it's like, okay, it almost looks like they're going to cop out of this ending. I wish they would go with this ending, but then they do go with that ending, and instead of the cop out, and it's emotionally better that way. It's second time viewing it, I felt like I was tearing up a little bit towards the end. It's great. I'm actually trying to think of a few things that I could even say bad about this film, because upon second viewing of it, I liked it more than I did the first time. So I gotta try to think of what it is about the first time I saw it that I didn't like it as much. I guess some of the humor is a little bit goofy for my taste, and that was more apparent on my first viewing. But on the second viewing, I didn't mind, and in fact, laughed a little bit more than I did the first time. So maybe it was just jarring the first time I saw it, but knowing ahead of time what some of the humor was going to be like, I actually enjoyed it the second time. There's a few times where the dialogue is a little clunky, but the second viewing of it was much more palatable. The main villain is Grimmel, but he's hired by a group of warlords that are trying to use dragons to conquer the world, much like Drago did, and they're probably like the remainder of Drago's army. Those three particular warlords were very weak villains and were almost unnecessary. All they were was there to be an army towards the end of the film for the characters to fight, and they're the only reason to bring the main villain into the film. And at first I was kind of like, that's kind of bad for this movie, but then I realized upon second viewing, they're just insignificant villains, and they really are meant to be like that. Most of the pacing is really great, and the editing is great as well. There's like 2 moments in the film where scenes don't transition all that well, or scenes end too much, so a little bit nitpicky when it comes to the editing. And when I compare it to the other 2 How to Train Your Dragon movies, I do like the other 2 a lot more overall. In fact, the second one's my favorite. First one is a very close second. And the third one is the weakest of the the weakest of the 3. But at that same time, the ending of 3 is just so damn perfect. And it's a great way to end the trilogy, and I loved it. So I'm going to actually give How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World 4.5 stars. The other 2 are more like 5 stars for me. This is a 4.5, and that's actually better than the Kung Fu Panda 3 movie. The Kung Fu Panda franchise is another solid Dreamworks franchise, and when it comes to that and How to Train Your Dragon, I'm going to give the edge to How to Train Your Dragon, even though Kung Fu Panda 2 is just as amazing as the first 2 How to Train Your Dragon movies, in my opinion. So, did you see How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews or countdowns of this year, of previous years, of whatever. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.